Okay, so before the break, we set up a little web page to start practicing with some styling rules and looking at things. Just a few words so that we can change some colors and sizes and stuff. Nothing too fancy on there. Completely random words, because the first thing on the list is sizing. And there are lots of ways we can control the size of things in CSS. I should have done this over the break. It's okay if I erase the board. That was from before the break, so I assume everybody that was putting that in their notes already has it. I still like to ask, though. So yes, there are lots and lots and lots of ways we can define sizes. Sizing in CSS. The first one, we're putting stuff on a computer screen. We're working on websites. Those websites are going to be viewed on a computer monitor or a phone screen, which means there's a standard term we use, and that's going to be pixels, which for our CSS is going to be px. That seems to be an obvious go-to, except for one little thing. Screen pixels and programmer pixels have not been the same in 30 years, 30 plus years. Obviously, there's some wiggle room as far as like when the better screens were first invented, but back in the days of those old lime green monitors that looked like dot matrix printer output, big cathode ray tubes. And a pixel was based off the size of an electron hitting that screen made. That was the last time programmer pixels and screen pixels were the same thing. And there's some density issues as well in modern equipment. We won't see it in this class. You will definitely see it working with pixels in your mobile app development course. We also have SIPs and DIPs, which are screen independent pixels and density independent pixels. But we're going to start with just pixels in this course. We're not going to see the exhaustive list. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm going to go to the board just to get a start. So pixels are a good start. That's what most of our programming languages are going to use when you refer to pixel size. But there's some issues with that, right? This monitor here is very different than the monitor here on my laptop. Very different size, different ratio. So if we size in pixels, how's that going to relate to those different monitors? Which is very, very different than the I don't know, I guess that's 6.5-inch moto phone in my pocket, which is going to be very different than an identical sized iPhone, a 6.5-inch iPhone. Right? The pixel density is different on all our screens. So that's why we have lots of different measurements and different things that'll affect things differently. Things are going to look different. We want to mix those stuff. So that's the programming one. That's the one we usually use in programming. So a lot of people work with other programming languages to lay things out on screen. So the pixels before. And if we put a size attribute in an HTML tag attribute, that will be in pixels. So it can relate easily to that. But we also have some traditional printing measurements. Traditional printing measurements. Which order should I go and do these in? Oh, I guess I'll go back to the beginning. So everybody's heard of the Gutenberg printing press, right? Kind of a big important turning point in history. Not the initial event of printing, but printing on a mass production scale. The movable type. We didn't have to make an entire new plate to print a page. There was, instead of that, we make a container and we just swap out what letters are in that container to make different pages. Movable type. So things were measured from the letters on the page. So one of our units is EM. Which is a really useful one. What EM is the size of the largest letter in that font, in the font we're using. Probably a capital M. I'll draw it with serifs there. The largest letter in the font is probably a capital M or a capital W. But in some decorative fonts, there might be one that's bigger. The one thing, width and height aren't the same. The biggest advantage of this is, this has a really nice advantage, and the size is based off the data itself. Size is based off data itself. So when we want a certain number of words to fit in a certain area, we base all our sizing off the size we're writing the letters in. Because that carries on, we can size our images with EMs and yeah, these are just units we have to size things. That's a really useful one. There are several traditional printing measurements. So to keep the list from being completely overwhelming, I was just going to use a few of the real common ones. One you've probably heard before is point, which is a traditional unit that is more explicit in its dimensions. There are 72 points in 1 inch. I'll spell that word out. So it's a point is 1/72 of an inch. The style rules you've probably heard about in your English classes, APA and MLA. Maybe Chicago style. There are some other ones, but those are the ones you've probably heard about. Most of those all require 12-point fonts. So it's 12 72 of an inch, which would reduce down to 1/6 of an inch, just the size of the font for standard. And I was waiting until I wrote this up here. Screen pixels and programmer pixels haven't been the same in 30+ years. Screen pixels are different for all these different screens that we have. So pixels actually, as far as programmer pixels, they base it off a point. So there's 1.5 programmer pixels in 1 point, to see how those relate to each other. Another one that's probably obvious is there's other stuff on the page. So we can use a percent of that. I erased the picture, but there was a bunch of containers there that we put our words into. Letters are made up of words, but we can use a percent of the parent container. Of parent container, which then can escalate all the way up or down if we use percents all the time. That is really nice for width stuff. If we have multiple columns, define a couple of like if we have 3 columns on the page, define 2 of them explicitly in a percent of the width, and then let that third one fill in the rest of the space. Helps with consistency on different screens and stuff. We'll see that. And let's finish out this starting list with some standard measurements. I'm just going to write inch, centimeter, and millimeter. And as you can probably guess, that list is going to go on for a while. Have both US empirical and metric names there. That's enough to hopefully indicate to you that there's lots of names. So a lot of the name systems. We're at a warning on this one. Be careful with these. Be cautious. An inch is an inch. An inch is an inch, but that seems different on different monitors. There's an R in that word. On different monitors. So if you're working on a nice big monitor, you know, a nice good screen, here in the classroom, I have these big monitors. Probably can't tell how big that is on the video. You want to stand beside it. If I stand beside that, I'm pretty much the average height, 6 foot, maybe a small fraction over 6 foot, but 6 foot. So you can tell next to my height how big those monitors are. So setting things up in inches would be great there. The example I always like to refer to on those, because most people have seen it in classrooms, or you might at some point if you haven't yet. Does anybody use Pearson My Math Lab for their math class homework? They're really bad about setting up their style stuff in inches, or they use centimeters, but it's a set unit of measurement. So if you're on a normal size monitor, like these here in the classroom, measuring things in centimeters is fine. But well, computers can get heavy, right? We have a whole bunch of textbooks in a backpack and are going to be carrying that around all day. Not a bad idea to have a light computer, a small laptop to do work on. Or some people just like the small laptops, right? They do 90% of the stuff on the phone. If they can't do the stuff on the phone, they want that smallest size laptop so they don't have a great big piece of equipment. Have you ever seen what my Mac lab looks like on those little bitty computers? Like a 9-inch screen. Or I shouldn't say computers, tablets that would click on the keyboard. So it looks like a laptop what you put on the keyboard, but really it's probably more of a tablet. And those little bitty screens, you measure stuff in centimeters, you run out of room really, really quick to write out math problems. And then there's scroll bars all over the place. If you haven't seen that, you probably will at some point. Or if you have a math class and do my math lab, next time you do your my math lab homework, try making the browser window really small and look at, see what it does. So you want to be careful with the actual sizes because there's so many different size screens. These others are nice. Pixels, EM, points, and percents are a really good starting point. And as you start to get used to mixing things, get used to different ones, then you can just hop on Google and find a longer list to extend that with. And we can mix them. Can mix units. So it would be perfectly fine to say, like the width of something, assign some CSS width property to be 7 pixels plus 14 letters, so 14 EM minus 3 points plus 8%. So that would be a perfectly acceptable size. We can mix and match. And that's, so today we're gonna have lots of lab time. That's why I had the really short list, and I'm not sure if we're gonna get to it today or somebody's gonna stretch over to Wednesday. So I wanna make sure there's lots and lots of time to practice these things. Let's see, applying a few of these. This should get you through the class pretty well. Pixels, EMs are the largest letter, which, yeah, that the big advantage of that is the sizes are based off the data on the page. So whatever your font size is, you can base every other size off that. Which is that line that I started to put in there earlier. And then erased it. I decided to wait till now, because that's one that I really like to use. So we need a root size of fonts to work with. So font size, we'll start with the standard 12 point. So now if I say 1 EM, everything else is a child of that HTML tag, HTML element. So it actually inherits that. Cascading the flow, the way it flows through the elements on the web page, there's inheritance there. So everything nested inside of the HTML tag, which is all of them, the body tag, the section tags, the header, the footer, paragraphs, they all inherit the rules we put for the HTML tag. And if we put more rules for the body tag, all of them would inherit that. And things flow down. So that gives us a start. Oh, there's also REM. So if we start using different font sizes, I'll go ahead and put that up here. REM is root EM. And the root will be the body tag. So if we since all of our other stuff is gonna be nested inside the body, the font size we set for the body overall, everything will inherit, and then we can refer to that size as root EM, no matter how many different sizes we have going on the page. So I'm just gonna start kind of resizing things. So what do we have here? We have a H2 element. So once again, we will see better, more selectors soon. So I'm just going to select my tag name today. So I'm going to select all the H2 elements on the page. And I want that bigger. So right now, there's a default size to it. Right? That star rule that says everything's 12-point font refers to our normal paragraph. So the heading stuff is naturally bigger than that. So I want that header much bigger. That's an important thing. So we can set that up with the font size property. And again, that general format for CSS is going to be everything, almost everything is spelled out with a dash between words. And the ones that aren't spelled out, you could probably guess almost all of them right now from looking at what's on the screen. Notice that minimum is abbreviated, which is a standard thing. So all those things that, all the words, all those Latin words that would normally get abbreviated in the same grouping as minimum are going to be abbreviated. And you probably have, just from that, you probably have some idea of the words that are going to be abbreviated. Not really very many. Most of them are, most everything is spelled out. Because typing's easy. Don't be lazy with your typing. So let's make that bigger. Let's say 3.2 EM. I'll probably make that a lot bigger. There we go. Nice, great big header now. And we have different ones. We can try some different things. 3.2 pixels. That's pretty small. You can't even really see that. We have to zoom way, way in to see that. Pixels are little bitty ones. Pixels are only a little bit bigger than a point, and a point is 1/72 of an inch. So pixels are little bitty things. 3.2 points is going to be bigger than pixels, but it's still going to be too small to see. It's 1.5 times bigger than what it was. So it's still just, we can tell there's something black up there in the corner. And if there was any other dark colors or shadows on the page, we'd probably miss that. Percent looks at the parent container. So if I change that to 3.2%, that's really small. I'm gonna make that 32%. It's still really small. Maybe 123%. It's kind of back to the size we had to begin with. If you remember what it looked like before I started making changes, it was a little bit bigger than the regular text, but not much bigger. But if we change the parent container, which we can get to with a headers thing, and then say like the min height, it will try to self-adjust to fit the stuff best vertically. Horizontally, we want to, when we start moving things, if we don't put any rules, it will try to just go all the way across the browser. But if we start putting rules, then it will try to fit what's in there. We'll see that very, very soon. No, see, it will probably annoy you on a homework assignment very, very soon, trying to figure out what's going on with it. Cascading style sheets, the cascading part, we talked about that. Bubbling and cascading, that's how everything else on the web page knows about it. So it's kind of complicated math to fully predict everything. Most people just do trial and error. Even people that know all the math to do it, it's like, okay, it's a whole lot quicker just to pick a starting point and take a couple guesses. Because when things affect each other in ways that you might not have realized when you started doing it. Oh no, I'll say make that 17 EM, make that really, really big. So our header section is big, which pushed everything else down. So now it has an explicit size. Probably could have made that a little bit, tried a couple different things there. 17 is pretty big. So I'll go back to like 7 tall and maybe let's turn that number around, 321% of the H2 tag. The parent thing called it. That spaced it out nicely. Our header got some extra stuff around it. Some white space above it, below it. The text is, and that header's nice and big. And trying things. I make a background color so we can see what's what. Color green. You see, there's the header section, and the H2. Give it a background color of blue. So you can see the H2 thing only surrounded that text. It only gave us enough height to surround that text precisely. But the header, we explicitly said how big that was. And then everything in the header just got loaded left to right, top to bottom. And the start of narrowing things down. We're going to see colors soon, so maybe I'll just comment this out. So our comments in CSS are the slash, asterisk, all the way until we have an asterisk slash. So what would be the multi-line comments in C family of languages? Cascading style sheets relate directly to something very common in C++ that is set up in the browser. So we don't ever worry about that. But we are kind of making C++ structs here. Structures, but it's abbreviated SDRUCT, one of our common ways of handling data in C++ is really what we're making here. And for some reason, the single line comments didn't use the single line C style comments didn't make it through to this, and as it got cleaned up, it became its own language. So it's normally a multi-line comment in C family of languages. Slash asterisk, and then everything until we hit asterisk slash is going to be commented out. Which doesn't really necessarily make it easy to comment things out, so I'm just going to delete the other one. So that worked. You see, after a couple of guesses, got those numbers down. Take a starting point, try some different things, see what size you like. Another thing that can kind of speed up the process is if you open the inspector. The pictures ran away. Oops. On the sources tab, if you hit the CSS thing, we can edit this right here. And when we edit it, we'll see the changes in live time. But It's only editing on what the browser is showing, so all the data has already been loaded in. We're not changing the original file. So maybe on that next thing, I think there's an aside tag there. So let's set a minimum height on that of 112 pixels. And notice how it changed immediately as I was doing that. Maybe a background color. Background color of that's not your color. Oh, and there's all the names for colors too. I mentioned the named colors. You'll see the predictive thing here, at least here, going here in Google Chrome. Pretty sure most of them have that. Has a whole bunch of named colors. Blanched almond, what color is that? Okay. That looks very different on my laptop screen than it does on the monitor up there. Which is another thing about the named colors. Is there a way I can put that on the? Yeah, it looks all, I don't think there's a good way that I could show it on the camera. I could try. Zoom way in and turn this around. Oh, no, not gonna work. But it looks pink on this one. I didn't think that would work, but I wanted to try something instead of just saying it. But on my laptop here, that looks almost pink. A very pale pink color. But on the monitor in the back of the room, it looks very brown. Over here, it almost looks yellow. So those name colors they look different on the different machines. If it's names that match, you're probably still good because it's going to change consistently, but it does change machine to machine. So that's where colors are going to be very important. Yeah, so you can see where those different article tags are that way, and see different sizing, narrow it down. But the thing I wanted to point out is when I go reload the page, those last changes are gone. So that is really, really useful for trying to narrow down your initial guess into the color or size that you actually want there. See things moving around and all that. See it on the screen in live time. But if you use that, remember to copy and paste that back to the actual version that is saved somewhere. So got a couple more tags. Spacing things out can be nice. White space is your friend. This is, as you can tell from the curly braces and semicolons, this is related to the C family of languages. So the white space will be removed before it actually runs, before anything actually runs. So don't worry about white space. It's only for your benefit. We could write this all in one line. That would be perfectly fine. The very last semicolon, we can leave that off because when it hits that closing curly brace, obviously that's the end of instruction as well. But it's probably better to go ahead and include it to begin with, because if you were to come in and add some stuff, if you left it off, knowing that, and then come back and add stuff afterwards, then it wouldn't be the last line anymore, and the semicolon would be strictly required again. So we could write it all in one line. Hit enter a couple times on these. That's kind of a common one too. A lot of people like that one. there's different, it doesn't really matter how we set up our curly braces and indenting and things. And white space, that's only for your benefit. I'm going with this because somebody just did a survey. As many thousands of programmers, what the easiest way to read those was. And this is what the majority said. Opening curly brace next to the keyword, indent everything in the block, and then closing curly brace lined up with the keyword. Is what the vast majority thought was easiest to read, but whatever is easiest for you to read is fine. Or if you're just, since most of y'all in here are probably just getting started with this stuff, feel free to change it. Don't bother me at all. Look for what you think is the easiest way to read. With CSS, I've also seen a number of people do this and say that they think that's the easiest one to read. But whichever way you like best, the white space is only for your benefit. So try a few different things and see what you think is easiest to read. Let's see, what else can I size on here? Oh, that's copyright info. That's usually small. White space doesn't matter. And I don't like working at the bottom of the screen, so I usually have a whole bunch of extra lines down there so that I'm not at the bottom of the screen. But we can also select that footer element and maybe make our font size 0.4 EM. So 40% of the normal letter size for the page. Probably a bit too small. Oops, what did I just click on? I don't need that window open. Oops, that's not what I meant to click on. Where's it? There it is. 40% is probably too small, so maybe 75%, 0.75. Smaller than that, 0.63. And this is the process that you're probably going to go through. This stuff can be predicted mathematically, but sometimes things will interact in complicated ways that make that mathematical prediction really tricky, and a much more complex calculation than it needs to be. So most everybody just does trial and error. Right? After you do it a few times, you'll have a good starting guesses for the stuff you want to do, and then just refine it from there if you find the one you want. That's the basic idea of sizing, and this is an active subject, so we learn by doing. So I'm trying to make sure there's lots of lab time today to learn stuff by doing. Then we get started on sizes, and that is not an exhaustive list that we looked at there. There are lots and lots and lots of them out there. Let's see. This is fonts and colors. I'm gonna do fonts next. Colors, I kind of want to talk about for a while. There's a whole bunch of pages in this set of notes about colors, and then just a few about fonts. So before we go changing those, it's okay if I erase the board and then make a few notes about fonts. Lots and lots of sizing. Google exists in our world. Using the measurements you're used to from real life might make it seem easier, but be very cautious with those because there's so much discrepancy in screen size anymore. Some people might even pull up the webpage on the watch. Or probably wouldn't call it a watch, but I guess they have clocks on them, but usually a little bit wider than a Fitbit, but about the same height as a Fitbit, and Bluetooth connection to the phone. Or probably a Bluetooth microphone speaker extension for a phone is the appropriate name for those. But they have browsers on them. So if somebody's going to look at your webpage in that, you definitely don't want to be writing the sizes in inches. They wouldn't be able to see anything. It would cover everything. So be careful with the actual sizes and mess around with some of those others. And when you start to feel comfortable with those, go check out a couple more sizes to look at. So some notes about fonts. First one is really important. The end user must have access to the font you used. That word finishes out the sentence nicely. So the end user has to have access to that font. So if it's a default font, that'll work fine. Some standards that we could go with, right? That's probably the first thing you're thinking. There's some standards we could go with. How about the standard, all the writing standards have Times New Roman font? It's actually going to give you a problem. I work at fine on PCs and Linux machines where it's installed by default. Chromebooks and MacBooks will give you trouble with that because Apple and Google both have their own custom version of Times New Roman, which is what's installed on their machine, and it's different than just the generic Times New Roman name. So the end user has to have access to it, maybe locally installed or included as a resource. Our book only mentions the local install, and even if I'm using Times New Roman font or Calibri or Arial, one of those fundamental basic ones that we would think is on every machine, I still include it as a resource. If I want to use that font, that's in the folder of the files, so we can use it. So we're gonna look at that. Otherwise, we can kind of narrow it down because we don't necessarily ask for a font. We usually set up a font family. Font family. And then it would look something like a list of them. If there's a space in the name, you'll need to wrap it in quotation marks. If there's no space, you don't need quote marks, but since there's a discrepancy to make that easier to remember, it might be easiest just to remember wrap the font names in quotation marks. So like Times New Roman, our standard one, comma, one of those V ones. They're spelled almost identical, and one of them is a serif font and the other one's not. Is vote. I don't know, I can check Microsoft Word. I bet that's on this computer. Just to grab a couple serif fonts. Oh, well, that was annoying. I realized I was gonna shut the program down. It's like, okay, so I'm thinking something with serif fonts. Oh, if you don't know that word, serif is the little flags at the end of the letters. So like for a U, we write a U like that. There's a little decorations at the end. Or sans serif is without the little flags, without the decorations. So that's our two main categories of fonts. So maybe one something with some sort of serif font here. So you can go over to Microsoft Word or something and just kind of look through a list of them, looking for serif fonts. Times New Roman. Cambria has little flags, but much, much smaller than Times New Roman. So those probably wouldn't be picked at the same time. High Tower text, that is great big fonts on it. I can put that on there. High Tower text. I was actually looking for the B one. There's two B ones that are spelled almost identical. And they're really easy to confuse. Which one was I thinking of? S T. I've only seen one of them. Okay, Verdana is sans serif. So I don't see the one I was actually looking for. I think it's Vacoma. And then it's going to go in the order we asked for. So whenever we load that web page up on the browser, send it across the network, somebody opens it up on their computer, it's going to try to load it with Times New Roman font. If they don't have that, it's going to look, see if they have high tower text. If they don't have that, it's going to have Vacoma. And usually we throw one of these words at the end. So these were all serif fonts. So if none of those are installed at the end, we can just say a serif font. Include, if none of the other ones are installed, use that. So we defined the whole family. A similar thing for sans serif. And then that's the font that we used. That's what our textbook covered. Personally, I kind of like to include it like an image. It's a resource that the end user might not have. So even if it's something common that I think they might have, I'll still go ahead and include that. So we're going to look at where to get some fonts here in just a second. The reason I've skipped past the color section of the notes and the reason it's so long is colors are very important to humans. The field of psychology, there's a huge branch in the field of psychology called color theory. That colors really do have impacts on humans. That's why most jail cells in our modern world are painted a light pink color. That's why so many fast food places have red and yellow in their logo, because those colors make humans want to buy food. So color theory is very important. So there's a lot of things to talk about on that and point towards some resources. So fonts aren't quite as profound, but they do still have a similar effect. The font choice won't go quite as deep as colors, but there's still a lot of psychological theories that can be applied. What effect do smooth corners versus sharp corners have? The block lettering versus cursive lettering. Monotype versus something that changes size. Monotype means all the letters are the same way. That goes really nice with EM sizing, because if all of your letters are the same size, made you're kind of filling out the same little square, then you know exactly how many letters are involved in a monotype font. Is it something hollow versus a pattern filling it or solid filling? All those things can have a subtle influence on people visiting your site. Put an example here, or 3 examples to consider. A wedding invitation, a New Year's Eve party, and a funeral memoriam flyer. It is very, very unlikely that you would use the same font on those 3 things, right? They're very different situations. They call for different things. But that's getting a lot of details. Decorative fonts. We have serif and sans serif are our main types, along with decorative. I guess I'll do a decorative up here on the board as well. Serif has little flags. Sans serif is literally without the flags. And decorative might be like a curly U. I'm a math person. That's when we write letters like that, we usually call them curly. And they signify special things, but a really curly cursive looking U versus a simple line that curves around versus something with the little decorative flags, the little flags at the end. So it's not a whole lot of decoration. It's just a little bit of flair. Those are 3 types of fonts. And then I'll go ahead and include this font weight. This can be the numbers 100 through 900. And browsers only use the hundreds. So really it's a 1 through 9, but we just have to include the extra zeros because that's what computers are set up for. So 100 through 900, bold, bolder, or boldest are the options for that. So it's not like Microsoft Word where there's only 1 bold button. We have 12. There's also font style, which would be italic. Either italic or none. I should put slashes here instead of commas because those, it's not all of them, it's one or the other of those. Whereas the font family, it's a comma separated list of all the fonts we think would work good on that site. Oh, yeah. There's another one that's a common Microsoft Word button you might want too, right? I ran out of room, I'll put it up here. Font decoration is where you'll find underline. But we'll find other things in other settings with font decoration. Like a font style is either italic or none. But we have a few decorations, underline something on one. So I can get you started with some of those common ones. So alternatively to this big long list, we can just provide the font as a resource. And it looks like this. We have a special type of selector. I'm going to mark out a section on the board here for the next part. As a resource, provide as a resource. And we have the selector that is add font face. So a special kind of selector in our CSS. And then inside the curly brace, we need two things. We have to say font family And I'm gonna write font name. And we make up this name. So this is kind of, we assign a font family name to this resource, and then we use it over in this property. So we have to assign a name to the resource, then we can use it up in this tab. And we also have to say where to find it. So we have a source property, src, which looks like this, URL. And then in parentheses, the path to the file. So file name dot TTF for true type font, or OTF, open type font. And then the format, again, is probably either going to be true type or open type. Say it's a true type font. Oh, then we need semicolons on this. And this one, I always want to pause and state this explicitly, especially for people who have experienced some other programming. That I know for those who've had me in other courses, we've heard me say this over and over and over again. A file path is always a string, right? Probably heard me say those words. Other instructors you've had teaching programming or other IT things might have said the same words. A file path is always a string, always a string. This is an exception. If we use the URL function in CSS, the file path does not get quote marks. I don't know who decided that, but I always feel it's important to point that out because every place else when we're writing things, our file path is going to be a string, which means we wrap it in quote marks. But the URL function in CSS, it does not have quotation marks. So slightly different. So once we have that, then we apply it to this property. So maybe somewhere later in the CSS sheet, I always like to put that sort of thing up at the top, make sure it's there before we ever get around to using it. Somewhere later, we have a paragraph selector. And in that selector, we'll say font family is going to be this font name we sent. And then we don't have any worries whatsoever about whether or not that user has the font installed. So before we break up for lab time, let's take a quick look at this. There's no shortage of places to get the fonts. You can grab them for your own thing. For years and years, I've been using this site called 1001fonts.com. They had 1001 fonts when they started 20 years ago. So there's lots of them. Oh, actually, you can see 18,780 pulled up right there. 10 on a page, whole bunch of pages. So probably want to start looking for things. There's some buttons, some filters. You can narrow things down. Sometimes fonts are going to be copyrighted. Some of the ones you might recognize, there's a good chance they're copyrighted things. One thing I like about this site, aside from that they have lots and lots of fonts, is they always include the information. So everything here is free to use for private purposes. So if you're not making money off of it, so it's fine for a classroom. If you're not making money, you can use it. And they always make sure the information is included, so that if you are making money off of it, they can tell you who to pay if it's what you're supposed to pay for. The things are copyrighted. One that I know is on here people kind of flutter around the copyright stuff, right? There's certainly not a Disney movie by that. The font's immediately recognizable and stuff. Let's go with this one. So you see, probably pushing copyright laws there, but it's very, very close. So it's something we could use. And on this side, it's free to use. So we just hit download, and it downloads the zip file. So 1001fonts.com, and there's lots and lots and lots of fonts on there. You can try some filters and narrow things down. So click the headline filter and narrowed it down to 4,000. So headline script got down to 893. Some of those you might recognize from movies if you're a big movie buff. They make a lot of those. Fonts are kind of a big deal. The guy that's been traveling the world for probably 10 or 12 years now, and various governments around the world finance him. He goes to old libraries, handwritten manuscripts, earliest days of printing, and he's turning everything he can find into a digital font. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots of them available. That's just one site. It's nicely organized, and it includes all the paperwork. That's one of the things I like about it. So I go to where that download is and extract the file. There it is. So here's what we have. There's a JPEG file, a true type font, which if we check properties should be .ppf. So here's the actual name. Oh wait, that's the folder. Oh, the folder. Properties on this file. There we go. So Harry Potter, written in Pascal case. For those who haven't heard that word before, Pascal case, multiple words are just jammed together. We just throw out the space, and each subsequent word starts with a capital letter, including the first one. And then the file extension is .ppf. On Windows machines, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I'm going to go ahead and unblock that because it does that default security thing where it doesn't want to open stuff sometimes. Like, oh, this was made on a different machine. This wasn't purchased from Microsoft. We can't verify that it's safe. That whole block thing. It'd be frustrating at times. So there's our font file. The JPEG is probably the images of it. Just some images or a logo, I guess. And then there's a read this file. So open up the text file here. Oh, there it is. Oh, looks like somebody in Germany made this. Another annoying read file. If you like my font, feel free to donate. All this stuff, and gives his address, how to contact him. So this site, 1001fonts.com, is really, really good about having all the documentation that's necessary. So it looks like this is just a random artist that just does it and that just enjoys making these things. So this stuff will be okay to use. So what we need to do is move this PTF file, the true type font. So I hit copy and then take that over to wherever this working directory is. Over here somewhere. Oh, there it is. I'll paste it in the same spot. And now we can bring that into the CSS file the way we saw. So I like to do that font face stuff up at the very top. So I add font face. And then we need those two lines I put on the board. And in this case, unlike the other font Later, when we get like the paragraph tag and assign this font somewhere, we'll say font family and use one of the names of a font family. But here, the at font face, this is where we assign the font family name to it. So the property looks the same. It follows the CSS naming styles, where it's spelled out with a dash, followed by a colon, and the value for that property. But here we are assigning font family. I'm just going to call it Harry. Then our source is a URL. And I always like to state this explicitly because it's everywhere except CSS. A file path is always a string with the quote marks on it. But in the CSS URL function, we don't put string, don't put quote marks on it. So that was called perryhotter.ttf. And then a space, and then the format of it. And then the format of it, and this one is a string, it's a true type font. That's why I have pictures. Did I type that correctly? Where'd that parenthesis come from? True type font in quote marks. There we go. So now the computer should know about it. So if we come down to say, well, I'll put it on the header and just leave the paragraphs like they were. So the header's nice and big. So say font family will be that what do I call it? Oh, here. Forgot what I called it for a minute there. Let's see if that worked. Uh-oh, I seem to have got a typo somewhere. Hope that didn't make any difference. I need to match the name. I match the name and then call that I haven't done this since the last time I taught the class. Let me put that on a paragraph and see if that works different. It could be the bold in the thing throwing it off. Font family should be Harry. So save that. Oh, where did I get a typo? I didn't put it in the right folder, didn't I? So there's the font. We're going to look at the file. It should look like this. And install it. If you haven't seen fonts before, there's just whenever you open up the file, there's a button to install it on your system so you can use it. I was trying to use it without installing it, and not sure where I made a typo. I need a comment in here somewhere. Does it word make a difference? So if I move that up to the very top. Well, I seem to have made a typo somewhere, so let's check this. Font face in CSS. They're leaving off the type on theirs. And the strings. Let me see what happens if I take these strings away. Or take the quote marks away. Does anybody notice anything spelled wrong, like typos or anything? Because typos do happen. Well, that was strange. Everything changed colors. But now it doesn't seem to be doing anything at all. Oh, there it goes. Not doing what it should be doing though. Oh, I did make a typo. This should be the word format. There we go. So you have to make sure your keywords are spelled correctly. Like variables, if you spell your variable wrong, as long as you spell it wrong everywhere, you'll be okay. But the keywords, the computer definitely knows how those are supposed to be spelled. That's hard to read paragraphs like that, so that'd probably be a much better one for the header. Let's put that up there. Sorry about that. And if you'll ever see me make a typo, feel free to speak up. I'm talking and typing at the same time, so typos are definitely prone to happen there. There we go. We got that nice little fancy header for that. And you'll need a new font face for every font. So you'll have to do all that stuff if you wanted a curly font. Need multiple ones. But that is, whoops. So I'll go back to 1001fonts.com and let's just grab something random. That. So I'll just grab this decorative font. So just find a font you like, download it, and let's see, downloads. So here's all this. Once again, they provide the terms of use of pretty much everything on that site. That's one of the things I really like about it, is you'll have all of that stuff. This guy looks like he actually has a font company. So commercial licenses and all that stuff. So he must just put things on here as sort of an advertisement. Like here's the free ones, but check the website for paid for ones. So I'll copy that over to our folder. Just grab your TTF file and include it as a resource, just like you would pictures and stuff. And I'm going to rename that organic. And oops, that's not the one I meant to hit. I found it's useful to always check the properties. Because remember, this is going to be posted on a Linux server, which is case sensitive. So we don't need to have like a .ttf and capital TTF extension. So it looks like it's lowercase, spelled organic. I don't think I need that unblock thing, but while the properties are open, I can go ahead and click that. And then I can set up a font face for that as well. And add font face, font family, organic. If there's spaces, you do need quotation marks around them. If there's not spaces, it should be okay. The URL I just renamed it as organic.ttf. Format that .ttf says it's a true type. But for some reason, I found that if we don't include the format rule there, it might act funny on some browsers. And then maybe use that in paragraphs. So here in the paragraph, we can say font family, organic, font size 1.5 EM. Probably something really hard to read. Yeah, that's kind of hard to read now, but the decorative stuff is there. The steps to get it to the page are there. That's the important one. I want to go over the steps. I'm going to go ahead and post this now. Because this seems like a good way that if y'all need a quick reference after we talk about it here, the site is SDEV-153.apz.com. You can just go in there and right click and view the page source. Be a quick way to look at the class examples. So we'll go into the file and just upload it. And if you set up an index homepage table of contents sort of thing, you want to update it to the folder. I left the index off, so I still have that generic homepage. So I'll just drag this over there. So I still have that generic page the server was doing without that stuff. Yeah, I told you all what happened, why it wasn't working, right? My antivirus software was blocking me from uploading stuff. I was so annoyed. I'm not going to use that particular antivirus software again. Which is, I had to have just been a dirty trick to get more people to pay for this stuff instead of use the free version. Because some people wouldn't realize it. They're like, oh, I need to make sure it's safe or something. It's like, no, the stuff leaving the computer is fine and will always be fine. So here's this site. Okay, that font's taking a while to load. So for really decorative fonts like that one, keep that in mind. There's so much information in that and detail in there that it took a little bit to load, whereas that earlier font was very, very quick. But if you want to reference those things, you can right click and view page source. Be the quickest way to see that code from class today. And you'll notice there's a link to the CSS. Which when I grade your websites, that's what I do. I view page source and then click the link to go over to the CSS. And when we do the JavaScript section, I'll look at we have one section on JavaScript this semester, so I'll look at JavaScript the same way. The browser reformats it. The browser, Google Chrome is set up to automatically, anytime it gets a markup language, it puts it in pretty brown. So it doesn't matter how you space it, it will we'll kind of redo some of that. But that's the idea on some sizing and bringing in fonts. Already erased the list. We'll look at colors and whatever else we have time for Wednesday between 1 and 3:30, because this is an active subject. We learn by doing. So now there's an hour and 10 minutes left on our scheduled time. So as always, text messages, I do learning messages, make noise on my phone, and I can jump back on the Zoom call in a split second. You can ask me questions anytime. The next hour and 10 minutes is when I know I'm going to be sitting here right in front of my computer, ready to jump back on a Zoom call in a split second to answer any questions. But otherwise, it's an active subject we learn by doing. So please spend this time productively, practicing some of this stuff. Pick up some of those fonts you like. Try this at font face so you have more control. That's a lot, much more sound method than relying on hope that the user has the font you want to use installed. Just send it like an image as one of your resources. Otherwise, unless anybody had any questions, that will be it for today.
Where do I go for the website endo point?
We will look at that here in just a second. I'm gonna stop the recording and we'll take a look at that second. Otherwise, I will see you all. See you all on Wednesday. Have a great day. Let me stop the recording.